All right. Take a look at chapter number 15. Related to the portfolio and job search. The fun part. So we're going to realize the purpose of a portfolio. We'll learn about what we're going to do with portfolio presentations, how to present them, how to go out gathering portfolio content. Constructing your own brand identity, which is a key thing to make you stand out from others and also to have people continue to recognize what work you're doing. Recognizing the ancillary materials that go along with it. Learn how to write and prepare a resume and cover letter. Being prepared for the job search process, and then ultimately becoming familiar with the interview process. All these things are important. The key there, of course, is dealing with the portfolio. So what is the purpose of a portfolio? Portfolio is your body of creative work that you're using to showcase what your aptitudes are, how you think conceptually and creatively, and ultimately then whatever experience you have. Understand that when you go out and start applying for jobs that early on, you probably aren't going to have much experience, which is one of the reasons why I want to start talking about finding anything that ties into the industry. When I started out, long before I ever did anything else, in college, and then I was working at a screen printer, which gave me a lot of experience to different methods of printing. We didn't only do screen printing, but we also printed on, we had a multicolor process, so I understand the process of it. We go through and start dealing with creating these screens. We're talking about separations, burning screens, how to apply those separations, going in and preparing artwork for embroidery. So all those things give you an experience. So anytime you can find that, that's why I always push people just taking a part-time job at a Staples or a FedEx Kinko's or anywhere that actually goes through and starts to do printing becomes very, very beneficial to you because it's experience with it. In those places you're going to find really good work that comes through, and you're going to find some really atrocious work. A lot of times you're going to be asked to try to take artwork that isn't designed at all to be printed. It's all screen based, and have to figure out how to make it work for the client. So everybody that works in design, whether it's graphic designer, package designer, product designer, any of that, anyone who works in design or even gets into art direction is going to need a portfolio. So inside of there, when we go through and we start to look at it, your portfolio is what's going to communicate to your potential employer. What are those skills that you have? All you're going to find too is when you go out there and you start applying for stuff, not to go through and knock down what GPA means, but they're probably not going to be asking you about your GPA when they go through and start to look at the portfolio stuff. So with that, portfolios are what are going to get you your job. So they're going to go through and look at, with that, they're going to be able to evaluate what your ideas are. How do you work with them? What do you come up with? Are these new, novel ideas? How do you work with typography? Do you understand typography? What are some methods that you use for visualization? We go back and start talking about those visualization techniques. Same thing happens. So how do you go about looking at stuff? How do you compose things? Okay, someone that works, your portfolio may go through and may just scream that everything I do is symmetrical, everything I do is asymmetrical. So looking at what's inside of there, how creative are you? And then ultimately, what are your tech skills? So we get into the applications. How well do you use the applications? So as we go through and we start looking at things as designers, some people are very, very good fine artists, and they can conceptualize and come up with these awesome ideas, and they may struggle on the tech side. Some people may not have a whole lot there as they go through, and their sketches may look atrocious, but they do amazing tech work once they get it into the computer. So we want to showcase each of those. You've probably heard me say many times that when I sketch stuff, a lot of people aren't going to understand what's in my sketches. However, when we get to the technical side of it and getting the stuff into the system, into the computer, utilizing the applications, that's where my real strong point is at. As we go through and we start to work on portfolios, it is beneficial to have some sort of an online or digital type portfolio. So with that, if you are planning to start to do freelance work or potentially believe you'll do any freelance work, it is beneficial to go in there and actually get your domain name A lot of people are going to go in and pull it with their own name. If you're going in there and working with a company, you already got your own company set up, pulling that domain name, so you have that available to you online so someone else can't take it. Now, with the expansion and continued expansion of the additional dots, it is entirely possible that somebody's going to go in there and get one, take whatever your business name is, .info, and be able to post something else up there. That's why when we go in the big companies, we'll go in there and they'll just go and wipe out all of them. So we go through and start to watch what's going on with that. Like I said, it is recommended that as you go in there and get started and start applying for jobs and that you go ahead and purchase your domain name with your full name. So with that, you can search and you can see what's available. One of them is GoDaddy, Hover's one. But with that, go in and look at what the different domain registrars are available. You can just go and purchase a domain name. You don't have to go in and upload a website right away with it. You can just pay the minuscule amount of money it takes to just have ownership over that individual domain name. They are so cheap, that's why a lot of them, when I think there's a company that's potentially going to be looking for one, people go in there and they will just go through and scoop them all up and then they'll just sit on them, park on them. So that way they use them for monetary gain. There are other things that you can go through and start to use to showcase your work. There's an Adobe app called Spark. With it, it's web-based. You can also access it on mobile devices. The nice thing about that is it's a dynamic link inside of there, though, that we go through when you add stuff. That link can keep updating with it. So you can go in, you can send it out to a client, they can look at it, and as long as you're not doing a lot of changes to the portfolio, you can keep sending that link, and as people go in and look at it, they're going to see the work that is inside of there. You can also use Adobe Portfolio. Adobe also deals into things like Behance. So when you start looking on that online, that digital type portfolio, there isn't anywhere specific that you need to go in and ultimately use. But those are some spaces that you can actually go through and you can use. They're very simple to use. It's a lot of it's drag and drop content. And like I said, you can put your hyperlinks in there to jump out to any other digital content. You have animations and stuff like that that might be posted up to YouTube or Vimeo. You can go ahead and you can link out to those as well. You can also go in and build your own full website design. Now, if you are focusing on or trying to go towards some sort of position that is related heavily on website design or like mobile app design and stuff like that, at that point you would probably want to build your stuff into something that not only is it the portfolio, but the portfolio itself and the way that it's assembled, the way that you navigate it also goes through and shows what you can do as a designer. And we go and we start looking at your digital presentations. Remember, the goal as we go through to start work with it is when you put in that website design, that the goal of that is to showcase your work, not to overpower it. What are we talking about here? But yes, we're using a tool that we regularly use. We're showing that we know how to use this tool, but the website itself shouldn't be so powerful that people don't pay attention to the additional works that you have inside of it that is linked into it. As you go into work with it, anytime we work with anything that's web-based or mobile app-based, smartphones, tablets, things along those lines, you want to make sure that everything loads quickly and it opens. So the worst thing, you go in there, you load something up, and people try to click on it, and they can't get to it, or they click on it to pull it up, and then it goes 1%, 2%. You don't want to sit there and wait for it. So make sure this stuff loads up. Make sure that it's easy to use. So as we go through, we start thinking about the navigation. I know we're talking early on at this point, based on taking this first class. You haven't gone through the rest of them. But still, look at user-friendly. We go and we'll start working. We do have a class in user interface. The class is in designing for digital environment. So we start to think about what is it that we are able to go in and begin to create with it. If you go through and you actually have some live websites, the ones that you designed that are up, that are active, the better thing to do that is take some screenshots of them. Now we go through, you can't add links to it. The downfall with that though is if somebody's in your portfolio, looking at your portfolio, and they jump on a link that takes them away from your portfolio, then now they're outside of the stuff you want them to be looking at necessarily. So now they're in there navigating through that. So for me, I always recommend just putting screenshots on there of the way that your pages look, the way that the websites look, versus moving away from your own portfolio. That's just because you want them to get through that content. You typically are going to, of course, design everything in your portfolio that people are seeing the things in a specific order, whatever that order ends up being, whether it's chronological as you grew as a designer, whether it's designed based upon specific skills. We're looking at raster graphics and then vector graphics and then animation and then video. So as we go through to start to look at that, it would be beneficial to keep them involved inside of what is there. Any contact info that you put inside of that digital should be easy to find, making sure that you're giving them easy ways to access you. So even putting in your email in there so that it has the mail too, so they can just click on it, automatically open up their app to go ahead and mail you, or of course phone numbers. As we click on the phone numbers anymore, it will automatically go through and allow us to call. If you are using any other relevant social media sites, if you're using your own personal Facebook site that you have pictures and everything posted, you out with your friends enjoying the weekend, I don't advise you to go ahead and link to those. If you have a specific one that is, your name dash artist, then yes, you can go ahead and you can put those Facebook links in there for them to go in and find that. Know that the other social media sites are still fair game. So if you go through and you start to work with stuff, you start to work with clients and that, you will want to know that they will probably go and look up your other social media sites, and anything that is public, they will go through and they will look at. Because that also provides then background for you. Put up a downloadable current resume. While yes, it's really nice for us to go through and see a resume on the computer, we also want to be able to download something to look at if we're going through, especially if we're starting to get into interviews. I myself don't use tablets during interviews when I'm interviewing other people, because to me, there's so much focus on that. What exactly are you looking at? All of us always sit there with digital stuff like, oh, I don't know what they're looking at. So with that, I put one on there that's downloadable because people are probably going to want to download that. Also, they may start marking stuff up, highlighting certain things that mean the most to them. If you go through and you add an About Me section, this is sometimes a way for you to kind of showcase your personality. So it talks about, it can actually be short, to the point, and witty. With that, how do you go about writing this stuff? Remembering that when we go in, we start to think about, we're going to get to the point of branding. The way that you go through and you present yourself inside that resume says something about you. The language that you use is there so that we can go through and understand more about you, about how do you think, what are the things that are inside of there. But you don't want to drag this out with a big, long section. So talking about some of the basic stuff, and then like I said, you can add some wit if you want to. When you go through, write your copy so that it's clear. You're going straight to that point. We don't want to be rambling. And the biggest thing in here, spell check, spell check, spell check, spell check. Because to me, if you don't have the patience or the ability to go through and proofread your own stuff, and you're turning things into me that showcase you as somebody with spelling errors, I am just left to assume that you're going to do the same thing when you work for me, and I'm not paying you to make spelling errors and us turn around and throw out $500,000 of product because we ran through, you did the work on it, and you went and checked it over, and we have spelling errors inside of those products. So think about that. Spell check, spell check, spell check. Write in a friendly, professional tone. So when we go through there, we're really going for, I'll call it business casual talk. So we don't want a bunch of jargon in there that's specific to the industry. But we don't want it so casual like what you're sitting there having a conversation with a friend while you're walking down the street. We're going in that midline that is there. As you start to work with your typography, it should be impeccable. So really looking at what's in there, focusing on letter spacing, line spacing. How are we working with it? What's the design of it? What have we chosen as the typeface? As we go through, we start talking about putting these together. Is this going to stay 100% this way for the rest of your career? No, it's not going to. What ends up starting to happen, depending on where you've been at, what you've done, is that you showcase all that talent going into there, but then in the design area, just like anywhere else, there's still that same corporate structure to it. What you start to find is, yes, you began, even mine, for an example, started out very much a designed resume, and now it's very straightforward, business-like, just because of, again, the shift in the different type of work that goes on with it. But I still have other business cards and that are completely still out there. The personality is what's put into them and everything. So again, different looks to them. You hear a lot of people that go in and they start to talk about, well, what do we do for a printed portfolio? Have portfolios changed over the years? Yes. When I was finishing up, everybody had a full-on printed portfolio. I've got the portfolio case in my office. I'll bring it out here once we get to the end, and I can just show you the whole thing. I'm pretty sure it's still in there. Say that. But if I do, I'll bring that out there and I'll show you the stuff in there. Now, the work that's in there, I still laugh at because the difference in the way I would do a bunch of the stuff now, having 20 additional years of design under my belt versus that. But it's there. So when we go through and look at it, what we're really going for in the printed portfolio is it's an opportunity for people to see the work that is there. Printed portfolios have actually gone through and changed a lot. From, like I'll show you with my portfolio case, all the way up to the fact that some people from a printed portfolio, to make it easy to work with, is they're printing them out of Shutterfly books. So they're just going in and they're designing the covers and everything. It's got a full custom cover to it, and they go in and they put the stuff in there. Apple was doing books. I don't think they're doing books anymore. You used to be able to go into Apple and you could buy a book through there. You can put the images right to the cover, and then it goes through and you can lay out the pages in there, put the captions inside of there related to what is there. But as we go through and we start to think about the printed portfolios, they themselves are also a design. So when we go through and start to put it together, think about that. That is a design problem in and of itself. That, hey, I'm trying to market myself to you, and this is what I want you to go ahead and work with to call me back. That's why some people have taken the idea of the books and thinking about it more of like an art book, so that when they give it to whoever it is that they're want to interview with, that book could potentially just stay there as a coffee table book, and somebody else could flip through it and they could see who is in there. With that, you could have contact information then in there for email and that, so that somebody else could get a hold of you if they're interested with it. Everything should be easy to navigate. So we go through and we start to think about what is there. It should be easy to navigate. You should want people to go ahead and view it. As they view it, it should be really effortless as to how do they find the information? What is it that I'm looking at? What are the applications that were used? If you think back, as you start to think about art books, and they go through, they start talking about, you know, the name of the piece. They talk about the media that was used. They talk about the size. They talk about the year in which it was done. Maybe applications. So as we go through, you start to think about what's inside of there. How can you work with that? Can you play off of that same concept potentially? Yes. So start thinking about the art movement. Start thinking about different ways to go about presenting what it is that you do. As I mentioned, there are a lot of different presentation cases and binders that you can ultimately use for your artwork. And they range from being very expensive to being very, very cost efficient. So there are some that we have that are like binders. So we can have removable sleeves inside of there. These come in all different sizes. They usually are zippered, so that way you can flip it open and you'll be able to flip through your work. There are different ones. So the attaché-like case is what I'll show you. So it looks like a briefcase. It's a big box to carry. Clamshell boxes, we have cases, we have binders that have permanent sleeves inside of there. So some people go through, get them in and get them pressed in there beside or between sheets, and then put those inside of a book as well. And then, as I mentioned, bound book. Bound book kind of has started to take off, mainly because if you go through and you build it inside a Shutterfly, you can buy so many of them, they ship them to you. They get really cost efficient once you get away from one-offs. But what it also provides you is once those run out, it's literally you just go back into there and you click or reorder, and you get a whole nother box sent to you. You don't have to redesign it or anything. As you go through and you start to work with the books, what you can also do though is the book design, if it's inside of somewhere like Shutterfly. Again, I don't think Apple's doing their books anymore, but all of them that make the book options, they usually have it saved. You can go in there, you can open it back up, you can replace items that are inside of there, you can update stuff. So if you have a contacts page on there that has your resume printed out, you can go in there and update that information when you go through and update the books. Inside of your portfolios, you're going to go through there, and typically you're going to have a description inside of it. As we go through, we start to talk about the different things that are there. So with them, on each page, you may want to talk a little bit about what your design concept was or strategy going into it, or what was the goal of the project. So with that, if you think back through some of the projects you'll do in the classes, the goal of this project was to go in and effectively take multiple images and combine them into a composite showcasing this, and this. Or the project was to do this, and I also then went in and did this, that, and the other. So as we start to think about it, what's there? Keep in mind who your audience is, and then with that, let the audience, or let the interviewer or the person who is reading your portfolio know who that audience was. You may need to go in and name them. So we go through and we start to look at them. Did you title your project? You may not have, and that's fine. We can go back through art history and we can look through and we can find tons and tons and tons of pieces that are called untitled, because they weren't ever formally titled. So we start to think about that. We go back to chapter 14, we were talking about the Old Spice, and they actually titled it Manliness Redefined. So have you gone in and titled the work? If not, it's perfectly fine. You can go through and you can look at a lot of different spots. So if you struggle to figure out, how about naming things, feel free to go and look at other spots. That's just one that's up there. Talk about how they go about titling the projects that they go through and do. So as you go and you start to work, the big thing is approach your portfolio design as an actual design problem. What is it that you're trying to do? What is it you're trying to showcase to your audience? Who is your audience? As we go through and we start to work with them, the audience is going to change a little bit. So as you go through and you start to put together, if you have a portfolio that has sleeves that you can move, I encourage you to go in there, and as you get ready to interview with somebody, this is what this company does. Make your portfolio relate to that. So you might go through and you may have 15 pieces that are in your portfolio that are the full portfolio, but only 10 of those are going to go to any individual client. So when you go there, like, this client doesn't need to see this work because it doesn't pertain to what they do. So think about, how are you going to work with that portfolio? How are the pieces going to go through there? How are you going to strategize what's going into it? Make sure that it's actually user-friendly. So when they go through, can they find your portfolio? So if we start looking at digital net, can they find it? How easy is it for them to go through? Where are you ultimately going to post this stuff? Do we have three-dimensional work? So if we go and we start thinking about this from a three-dimensional, we're talking about three-dimensional fine art. So with that, did you work in clay and stuff? If so, how are you going to get the images of that? Are you going to take them yourself? You can. And you take a nice piece of white paper and you can drape it up towards the wall, a nice little curve to it, set it up there, get some lights, control how the lights go on there, and take the photos. If you can't, then find somebody to take pictures of it. Now with that, you can pay someone to professionally come in and shoot them. The other thing you can also do is you probably have a friend or know somebody who has a camera and possibly has some lighting. Can you use studio lighting in here? Yeah, you could. Just look to make sure that it's actually showcasing what it is that you want it to showcase. So you have to really think about that. This is the work that I want to put in here. If you have work that's fine art, can you actually put it on a photo stand to take a shot of it and capture a really nice image of it? Or do you need to take it somewhere and have them put it on a nice large scanner to scan in the artwork? It really depends on what is it that you're trying to go through and work with. Look at what's written on there. If you aren't a great writer, then have somebody review this stuff. Write the stuff out, have somebody review it, proofread, you probably ought to say this, you probably ought to say that. So that way you make sure that it's synced and also very well written. With this, it goes in and talks now, knowing whether or not you actually want to present a variety of work or focus on a particular area. So we get into things early on. You may find, I've got like 40 projects that would work really well for this company. but what is it that they're specifically looking for? Is it better for me to go in there and say, I'm just going to focus, that this job is all about user interface, I'm going to focus on my UI tools, the things that I've designed, that's going to be the main focus on here. I'm not worried about the full app and everything else with it. So maybe that's where you start at. And then as we go through and we start to work with it, you expand out, then that's sent to them at first, and like, oh, they're going to interview me, okay. Now you showcase the other stuff with it. This is the additional things I can do. Then it goes into, as you start to work with designing, you may shoot your own photographs, but the job isn't about a photographer job, it's a design job. So you go to the company, you only send them your design work, and they get in there, and then during the interview, there's an opportunity for you to say, by the way, all the work that you see here, the photographs inside of there, I've taken all of those. Opportunity to expand off of what it is that you do. If you want to focus or go into a specialized area, let your portfolio show that. This design, this is specifically what I want to do. I don't want to do the other stuff. I have no interest in doing the other stuff. I want to focus specifically on an area. Have the portfolio actually do that then. Reflect if that's specifically what you're interested in. Nothing worse than going to work for a company you really love what the company does. There's a specific thing you want to do, and then all of a sudden you don't get to do that. Because they looked at your portfolio and they're like, oh, well, they can do this, so let's go ahead and let's offer them the opportunity to go over and do this instead. And so as we go through and start to look at it, if you want a wide range, or you do a wide range of stuff, then let the portfolio go through and showcase that as well. Just depends on what exactly is the goal of your job, what's the company do, and sometimes it's even how bad do you want the job. If you really want to work for that company, then you're willing to be in there like, oh, you mean so 10 hours a week I've got to be the janitor and mop the floors? Well, if that's what it takes to get into the company that you want to get into, you can say it, but then that's what you kind of do with it. So you can say, yeah, oh yeah, I'm great. I'm lovely with a mop. It's like a giant paintbrush, and I just erase all the dirt that's on the floor. So it just depends on what you want to get into, and that's what it gets. You get into certain jobs. There are people that, that's how they got their start. You start to learn from the company, from being able to do something. That's why I say getting into any company that has anything design related, you can get there doing something. Even if you're working for a printer, your sole job is, I come in at night and I load the printer with paper. You still get to see the process. You still get to see the products. You still get to learn what's there, and then you move your way out of it. I've had many friends who started out running the printer. They literally, the designers did the designs, even though they had the same degree as the one that's sitting in the office. That would come out there. They're proofing the whole thing on the computer screen out on the printer, aligning it on the different substrates that are printing, and they're running the print. Well, then they finally get tired of working in the print area, and they go into the office, and they're in the office for a while. And one of my friends actually went from being in the print house to in the office. He didn't like being in the office, so he went back to the print house. So as you start to work with stuff, understand what's there, and you can learn from everything along it. As you think about the portfolio, remember, this is a process. This is an experience that your audience is going through. The audience that's going through it are the people that you're hoping to actually want to employ you. So think about that experience. What are you having them do with it? How are you engaging them? How are you keeping them involved with it? Now we go through it, we talk about starting with a bang and ending with a bang. So right away it's just boom. You want a project in there that's going to grab their attention, that they're going to be thinking about. And I always talk about this in two ways. One, if you show them this amazing work, and there's a lot of debates on do you show them the best work first or the second best project first, and save the best one for last. Depends on what you think you have in there and how it's going to ultimately go through and work with. And I always joke around and say, you put the project in that's going to wow them right away, because then they look at that and they go, wow, that's really cool. It's neat how you did this. They start asking questions about it. When they go to the next project, they go, wow, this project isn't very good. But I know they know what they're doing because I saw the first project. And they get to the third one. Maybe it's the same way. Like, they're struggling with some type on this one, but that first project was still amazing. I know they know how to use type. So as you start to look at it, remember, it's an experience, and you're trying to get them on your side with it. So there's a lot of debate that I usually have with people. Like, for me, I want the project that's going to knock your socks off the first one. Because if the rest of it's bad, I'm hoping that when they go through and they flip backwards through my portfolio, get back to that first project, they go, yeah, that's still right there. They know what they're doing. The big thing with it, though, is if you start and end with both really good projects, so the middle stuff tends to go away. It's kind of like the story. You remember how the story began, you know how the story ends, but you can't fill everything in between necessarily. So with that, make sure that you're going through and you're wowing them at the beginning and end. We have that last general impression that just pushes out there that says, yeah, this person knows what they're doing. I mean, it started out awesome. Had some pretty good stuff through the middle and it ended amazingly. So start to think about that as you go through and you organize it. But the big thing is that everything that you do, you are ultimately building your brand. So never forget that building your own brand is about determining the things that make you different from any other designer, and also then what goes through and actually shines that light on you. So you're trying to put that spotlight on you. What is it that you can do that is different? So I get to like final projects in all of my classes, I talk about this is the time for you to show me what you can do, for you to wow your classmates, for you to brag about your capabilities utilizing the applications that we're using inside of each of the classes. So when you go through and start to build your brand, what are some things? What are those distinctive things that relate to you? What are those traits? Choose a few of them. How do you go about thinking? What makes you a different designer? How do you think? How creatively are you with things? What is it that you're bringing to the table that nobody else is going to bring? How are you ultimately presenting yourself professionally? This goes into everything. It goes into your work ethic. It goes into the way that you dress, the way that you talk. How attentive are you to stuff? The time that you spend working on things. What are the things that people perceive about you? This can go and you can start asking other people. When I'm around, when you see me, what do you think? The work that I do, what do you think about it? If they're not telling you what you're hoping, then what do you want them to think? So when they see your work, what do you want them to think about? You know, well-structured. You don't think it's eclectic. So wow, you know, things they come up with, I'm not quite sure where it comes from. What is it that you can do both in the resume and the way that you write, in your work that you're presenting, that you can show that makes you distinctive? And then making sure that as you go through this process, though, what is that takeaway? What is that one sole thing that you want the people that go through and view this to take away and remember about you after they look at that? Is it the wittiness of the writing? Is it your use of color? Is it your use of typography? What is it that you want them to do? Like, wow, I just can't believe how they went through and they built that. There was a group that's a company called Fresh Produce out in South Dakota that they do internships every year in the summer. They have multiple internships. And they get a lot of people that apply for them. And there was one person who applied, and they actually had their entire resume laser etched onto a wooden cube. And that's how they sent their application into the company for the internship. Now, the people who went through and I had presented to my class at one point talked about it, and they said, you know, to this day, I can't tell you what the person's name was, what exactly they did. I can tell you that they got the internship, and I can also tell you why. They got the internship because what resume was the first resume that every single person looked at? The cube. Because it was in a box, and you couldn't put it in the middle of the stack because the sheets on top when you're walking, they'd fall off. You didn't want to put it on the bottom of the stack because then you're holding onto this cube and the papers are all draped over top of the cube. So every person, and I think there were like 15 people that would go through the resumes to decide who to offer the internships to, though. Every single one of us looked at the cube first because it was always on top. So with that, it's thinking about what's there. So like I said, all they're talking about there is that they don't remember the name or anything of the person, but they remember that one point that they thought differently about how they went about presenting their work. So kind of think about that stuff. As you get into the identity, so placing your name on here. What's there? How are you working with your name? Some people go in and they deal with the signature being the key thing, so they use their signature in there. How are you working with the type on there? How are you going into this? This is branding. This is that identity. When people see it, they know exactly who it is. So start thinking about how is it we go in and we start to see that. Your descriptor. What is it exactly you're looking for? Your resume inside of there. As it goes through here, let's Twitter on here. What are some of the other social media spots that you may be using? And then the elevator speech. It's like, what's an elevator speech? If you work in business, ever get into business, we'll start talking about your elevator pitch. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about your elevator pitch. You got 30 seconds to go through, and I say, I have 30 seconds that I can give you for you to explain to me who you are and why I should hire you. Go. What is it that you're going to say? What's going to be in there? What do you do? What do you provide that somebody else doesn't provide to me? Again, it's the process, and for every 30 seconds you take up, that's money lost, that's time lost. So when we go through, we start to think about that. What is it you're going to have on there? So really think about that. Think about how you can quickly go through and throw this at somebody. And it's key to get this in there because you don't ever know who you're going to be talking to. You don't ever know how much time you're going to have to put the stuff across. So as you start to think about that, what is it that you're going to do? What is it you're going to be able to provide? This is where it's nice as you get to the point too, as you start to work, as you're going out to interview and stuff, even having simple business cards on you that just relate to getting links back to where your content resides at. You run into somebody, you're like, you're literally, you could be on an elevator. Yeah, I'm a graduated working graphic design, and this is what I do. This is what I provide, this is how I can work, throwing the whole stuff out there, and then if you're interested in learning more, here's my card, follow the link on there, you go there, you can view the information. They want to view it if you hit them with that 30-second elevator pitch and then love what you have, maybe just the personality you brought to the table, they're going to go and look at it. If they don't, they're going to throw it away. It costs you, 2 cents to make that card. So start to think about what is it that you can go through and do to have there. What are typefaces that you're using? I talked a lot about going in and early on going in and choosing typefaces that you know how to work with, you know where you need to adjust kerning on them, you know what leading works for them, you know what sizes work best, you know what's in the family, all of those things inside of it as we go through and we start to think about typeface. So how are you using those inside of your overall visual identity? Your logo type. What is it you're going to do for your logo type? How are you playing with that to make it thoughtful? Working with typography. What does the resume look like? A straightforward business resume for somebody going to design probably is not going to be that functional. Are you using icons and symbols? What ones are you using? Are they recognizable? You probably don't want to go away and start using your own custom icons and symbols to lead to the standard stuff. So we start looking at you're using something for Facebook and Twitter, LinkedIn, and that. Keep those consistent. What are you using for a color palette? What are those colors saying? It is okay if we're dealing with black and white, because that's what you're working with, or grays, and to take the logos from the various things and simplifying them. Making sure that you take all that stuff, then as you go into that portfolio website and you're showing that stuff as well. And then when we get into the social media stuff, where are we sharing photos and videos from? Can we embed them? You can embed them so they play on the page. It'll keep them in that page, working from that page, and not allow them to get moved outside of it, because of course once they get moved outside of it, we then have no control of what else is going on, and will they or will they not ever make it back into where we're at. If you're using something like a blog in that, make sure that if you're linking to a blog, the blog has updates to it, that you regularly use it, and that they don't go in there and look at it and go, oh, their last post was from 2.5 years ago. What that says to me is that, oh, they want me to go and look at their blog and say, look, I've got a blog, but it also shows me that you're not interested in continuing to push your own brand because you're not updating those blogs. So if you're linking out to something, make sure that there are updates to them, that it's relevant updates, and that you are going to consistently use them. If for some reason you stop using something, then make sure you pull that off of there. With the resume, we talk about that. Typefaces, where are we looking at our type at? What's the color palette? It should all work back into that branding. Making sure that we think about how are we composing it. It is another art piece. Your resume is that art piece that is going to lead them into your work or distract them from going to it. So if they look at it and they're no longer interested in it based upon your resume, they're never going to get to see the portfolio. Think about how is this going to look when we print it off. So if we're going to print full bleed or partial bleed, so we have ink going off the edge of the page, can you do that on the printer you have available to you? If not, then we have to think about where are we going to print this at so we can print it and then go through and run with finishing and actually cut that out so it goes to the edge. How to write and prepare a resume. So when we go through and we start looking at your resume, a resume is ultimately a summary of your skills, education, and work experiences. So with that, we're putting those together to pass out to your potential or prospective employers. So as you go through to work with the information, you need to go through and gather what is relevant. You need to take all of that relevant information and you need to present that information then in a clear and interesting way. So with that, how are you making sure that they're getting what they need from it, but also make it visually interesting so that when they go through and begin to read it, that again, it is a visual piece. It's showcasing what you do as a designer. So when we go through and build it, you've got a brand. You've already built that brand. That distinctive brand is your brand. Your resume should not look like my resume. Should not look like the person sitting next to you, person in front of you, behind you. It is yours. It's all about you. How have you gone through and worked with that? So the information hierarchy that's inside of there. Just like we go through and we deal with all other designs, we start thinking about the information architecture, the structure that's on there. What do we see first, second, third, and beyond? Same thing's going to happen inside of our resume. This essentially is your promotional design piece. You are designing this. This is what's going to showcase, promote your capabilities, and also make you appear different from everybody else. We like to be able to go in and look at resumes and quickly say, all right, this person here's got some character, and we can see it based upon the way they laid this out. This person over here is very structured. They're set in their ways based upon the standpoint that they're using a template we can tell for this portfolio or for this resume. So as we go through and think about that, what happens with that? Doesn't mean that one person is a better designer than the other one. It just starts to show who's going to fit better within the company that you're ultimately applying for. So we need to go through and make sure that we have a clear visual hierarchy. There's unity amongst the resume and the rest of the pieces. That there's clear communication. So what is it you're saying to me? That there's visual interest, so I'm in looking at and being a part of it. And then we start talking about impeccable typography, which goes into the layout, goes into the typeface choices. And then we've gone through and adjusted everything. So make sure that it's neat, legible, and ultimately well designed. I will see stuff that comes in, people apply for jobs, even here when we start talking about things institutionally. As they go through and they start to apply for stuff, I do look at the design parts of it, like why don't all of your margins match? Spelling errors drive me crazy. Because we use applications now that every application has a spell checker. Prior, go back, I don't know how many years ago, before some of the applications had spell checks built into them. Okay, maybe you have an error here for one reason or another, just from decision fatigue as you go through and look at it. But now they're all there. So we want to really go through and start to think about designing what it is that we have inside of there. So we go through and we start looking at some sample content. So we have our objective. What is it that you want to do? Again, succinct. I want to, I'm looking for a job, entry-level job as a junior graphic designer. On your education, we're going to go through. We want to list what colleges you've attended, what degrees you've earned along the way. If there's any certain things in there Again, your most recent is going to be the first one. So in this case, we go through and we start to look at it. We've got 2021 BFA Graphic Design, Robert Bush School of Design at Keene University. We have 2019 to 2021 Dean's List, graduated magna cum laude. So with that, we start to look at what is going on inside of there based upon the different institutions that you've been at. We get into the design skills. What are those design skills that you have? Now really go back and start to think about what is it you're doing. So we're talking about design and also any other technical capabilities that you may have that relate back to our design. So if we go through applications that you know how to work with. If you look at fine art skills, what's available to you inside of there. So when you go through and start to deal with marker counts as we look at designing new products. What are the different areas in which you've gone through and worked in? So if you know printing processes, talk about your printing processes. If you've gone in and done some stuff for editorial design, do that. If you've done package design, list it in there. Think about anything that goes and works back into that. So software skills, technical skills, if you understand production, maybe you have a unique background. One of the things that I always put in when I was dealing with applying and working with stuff was that I've got a machining background. So with that I can do CAD drawings, I understand CAD drawings, isometrics. So when we go through and start to think about stuff, what are those other skills that you may possess that are part of that? So put those in there. When you get into your experience, again, just like the education, most recent first. Go through there, list the job titles. Early on, you may want to even list what exactly you did there. Sometimes the job title doesn't really explain anything that you've gone through and done. So with that, when you go through and you begin to list those positions and the job titles, I always like to...
Could you try again?
No, Siri, I don't want. But sometimes you actually won't be able to make out from what that title was. So go in and you just list a little blurb that I went through and I did that. For mine right now with education, my position doesn't really say exactly what I taught, so inside of it breaks down classes taught and other responsibilities. Maybe you're working as a designer somewhere, but along with the design stuff, maybe you're responsible for some other parts. Maybe you're dealing with the design part of it, then you also lead over and you're responsible for inputting the billing information. So once you go through and you print it, we did this many shirts, this many colors, so I need to jump on the computer, pull up the job, and punch that information in. So that's in the system. So now it goes into the fact of overseeing, billing input or something along those lines. If you have any awards or honors that you've earned, anything from going all the way back education-wise to scholarships you maybe earned, things awards you gained throughout your college career. So have those things listed in there along with the year that's there. You may also then have any type of professional workshops. So with this, maybe you've gone on, yes, you have a degree in something, but then you've gone on and done additional coursework. List those. If you find yourself in workshops, list them. Anything that goes in there to show that you're continuing to expand on it. And inside of it, you may see additional academic awards that you may also have earned as well. But the big thing with this, we start to look at, we get into the professional workshops and that, or additional training, is that we see sustained inquiry. And when we go through and start to look at it, people who actually have sustained inquiry to me tell me that you're interested in staying up with what's going on technology-wise. You're interested in staying up on what's going on inside of the industry itself. So we start looking at things like for graphic design. So we have the AIGA. You may be part of AIGA. Are you attending events to see what other people are working on? What other actual conferences are out there? I tend to go to one called Learn Launch, which is a mix between education, business, and industry. So we go through and we start to look at that. What we're really looking at then with that, we start to look at business and industry. So the business side of it is the entrepreneurship. So what we have is we have designers that are doing stuff. We have businesses that are interested in investing their money and stuff into it on the entrepreneur side of it, and then we have the industry, which then is interested in taking what has been developed between the two and putting it into use. So as we go there, we start to look at it. We have a sustained inquiry. You're interested in learning. You're interested in making the processes better. To me, it's going to show that you have an interest in, of course, not only making yourself better, but then you're also going to bring that stuff into my organization.
When it talks about spell check, proofread, have somebody else proofread it. Because again, we get into that situation, which a lot of us will start talking about called design fatigue, and that we're looking at stuff, we're seeing the stuff. To us, our mind has seen it so many times, we now know exactly what it's supposed to say, so we allow that error to stay in there. So let someone else look at it. Pay attention to what we have with our margins. Early on, those are the first few jobs you're applying for. You're going to want to keep the resume to a single page. Nobody wants to flip through multiple pages. Mine now, if I were to send it out for jobs, it's close to 11 pages by the time you get done with all the exhibitions I've been a part of, education, design stuff. So there's a lot of things that get onto that. So then it might expand out. Also look at what you're using for your professional email address. If you haven't pulled up one, or you don't have one yet, that is your name at Gmail or your name at Yahoo, any of those, I strongly suggest you go ahead and you get one of those. And then use that specifically just for job stuff. The biggest thing as we go through and you start working though is to keep designing. Don't stop. Even when you get into situations where maybe you're working, we'll call it some mundane job while you're trying to go through and get your career set. We've all done it. Prior to me going in and becoming the tech director of a theater, from the last day that I actually finished up my last college course, I was working on my thesis. My last college course was done just before Thanksgiving in 2002. My degree was officially completed with all of my MFA stuff turned in. My degree, if I remember right, was March 13th, I believe 2003 is what the date is on my MFA. From November until then in February is when I had to fly back down to Savannah to take care of the final paperwork part of it, hand everything off, and had to go to the right people and get all the signatures I needed. And then even during the summer, I worked the job loading beer trucks. That's what I did. Worked at night, 7P, 7A. And that's because I chose a job that allowed me to continue to search for what it was that I wanted to do as a career. So as you go through and you choose something, don't choose a job that's going to hinder you from being able to pursue what it is that you want to do. But all along the time in which I was doing the other stuff, I was still doing design work. I was still playing with the applications that were there. I say playing because I think once you get into design and start having fun with stuff, it becomes like playing. So make sure that you choose something that's not going to hinder you from going and doing what it is that you want to do. Yeah, was it ideal, working all night long? No, there's a lot of other things there, sleeping and stuff, but it just changes the focus, so that's what you go through. And then you apply the same skills into any job that you do, that all of a sudden, yeah, I worked at a place that had no bearing at all on the rest of my stuff. My supervisor that was there, I listed as a reference right away. Because what they're going to say is, yeah, they're here, they show up every day, they work hard the whole time, and no complaints about their work ethic, and that's what you go after. So as you go through work, don't allow yourself to get into a position that doesn't allow you to continue to expand off of what it is that you want to do. So keep designing, keep thinking of everything as a design process, and things will go very well.